Okay, so good morning everybody. It's still early, but it's a full room, so it's nice. In this first session, I'm actually a day-to-day Drupal consultant, but for this session I want to take a step back and take a look at the Drupal system at a high level, just to get a bit more high-level overview of all the concepts that are used in the Drupal system. To give you an introduction into the Drupal ecosystem, because Drupal is much more than just a product, it's also an ecosystem. So, actually the main goal of this session is to give you an overview of all the main concepts that are going on. So my name is Jan Lemmens, I work as a consultant at Complexo. Actually, Complexo is a company, its roots lay in Belgium. We have two offices in Belgium, but last year we just opened a new office here in Romania, in the city of Cluj. It's really the best place to do Drupal in Cluj, I think. If you're interested and to know what we stand for, you can always take a look at our website, it's on complexo.ro. So, for the agenda for this session, first of all we're going to give a short history of Drupal. What's the story of the product actually. We'll go over the main concepts, and we're going to talk about functional features. How does Drupal deal with all functionalities required in a typical content management system? And we go over the technical features, and we're going to talk a bit about the product lifecycle. How does a typical updating in Drupal work? And we're going to take a sneak peek at the future of what's next. So, first of all, a short history. Drupal is an open source system, like most of you will already know. The source code is freely available on the web. It's free of licensing costs. It does not mean that all websites are free. So licensing costs of the product are actually not. Next, there is also the public scrutiny of code. It means that there's a lot of eyes looking at the code. Bugs get discovered very fast and get fixed very fast. So those are a couple of advantages of it being an open source system. It was made actually in Belgium. It was created by a guy called Reea. Actually created this as a system to share messages across students and government where you stay. So by nature it's really a system that fosters user-generated content, comments, message board, etc. So that's really the nature of the system. So, Reea now works at Akia. It's one of the sponsors here too. And actually, Akia isn't doing any Drupal projects, they're actually delivering services around Drupal ecosystem. So they're offering cloud hosting, they're offering 24/7 support to customers, to their partners. So that's what they're doing. They're not actually executing on real end-to-end projects. Actually helping teams build projects. So, it has been developed since 2001. We had 7 major releases until now. The 8th one is coming up next year. And it's very organic, there's no real central roadmap. It's also partly caused by the fact that it's an open source system. So everybody in the community has the right to just raise his hand and propose new functionalities or change things up. So there are a lot of, the community is very big right now, more than 1 million people all around the world. And the community actually makes sure it maintains the ecosystem. So it is responsible for several parts of the Drupal ecosystem. First of all, you have Drupal core. Next to that, it's the core product. Next to that, you have all the modules that come with core, and also the themes. And also documentation, they also offer support and make sure the Drupal modules get ported to the next versions, those kind of things. So it all passes to the community. So Drupal core, people working on Drupal core are actually very participant in the community. They've been there a long time often. So this is a picture of some brainstorming happening. Between some people in the core community. So we're actually discussing some things about multilingual stuff. So how does the community is structured actually? So you have Reea at the top, he's the project lead, and he actually coordinates various working groups. facilitates the workings in the community. Next, you have a security team. Then you have several working groups for several initiatives for new Drupal versions. So right now we have several initiatives for multilingual, for global, for content, for configuration management, for example. Those are all separate initiatives and they all have their own need. And there's a documentation team, and eventually you have a technical working group. So, and Dries is all coordinating this stuff. Next to that, you also have the Drupal Association, which is a separate thing, which actually makes sure that all the Drupal cons get organized, money is there, so that kind of stuff. So, to finish up the history, just take a look at the software stack for a minute. So, we're talking here about what is the recommended software stack to run in Drupal. So, Drupal is written in PHP. That component needs to be there. Then you have some different options you can take, but the preferred way of working is using an Apache system. It's the most supported system web server to run Drupal on. So PHP runs very well on Apache. Next to that you have a MySQL database system. And underneath you best if you have a Linux system. You can swap out the 3 bars in the bottom if you want. You can swap in an Nginx or maybe a SQL server from Microsoft. You can use Windows at the bottom. But this is actually the recommended stack because the most support is actually available for this stack in the community. Most documentation is written for this stack. Everything is tested against this stack. There are people working on doing things with Microsoft stacks, for example. There are working groups on Drupal.org where you can check things out. This is actually the recommended stack. So right now let's go over to the main concepts of the product. Actually, Drupal is a very lightweight system. It's actually just a basic content management system with some APIs on it. And actually the real functionality comes from extending the system with so-called modules. So actually this is, for a typical Drupal system you might compare with a car without just an engine that has wheels. So you can actually create a working website with it. It's not actually going to provide you with much functionality or fancy things. So to add real functionality actually comes from the contributed modules. So you can have several modules plugged in, for example, to have slideshows or different themes coming in. So the core system is really to be extended with extra things. That's actually the philosophy of the product. So I definitely want to make a comparison between core on the one hand and contributed module on the other hand. Because there is actually there's the important difference, which is actually the quality of the actual modules. The quality of the modules is not always as good as the quality of the core system. In some cases it is very good, in some cases it's not really that good. So there are several problems with contributed modules which you have to take into account when selecting these modules. So for example, security. They're all covered by the Drupal security team if they're stable. But some modules do not have stable versions, so you have to run alpha versions or release candidates. So be aware of that. Code quality is not always as good as Drupal core. Test coverage in the contributed modules. Also difference UI, so usability, consistency across UI, consistency with Drupal core UIs. It's not always that good, and also the interoperability between the modules can also be a problem. So those are things you have to keep in mind when selecting modules to add to your website. So typical things where we look at when we select modules. So first of all, what is the maintenance status of this module? Is it still maintained? Or for example, what is the development status? When was the last release? Is it updated? What are the number of installs going on? So you can have a look at Drupal.org for every module, see a number, which indicates the number of times that module is used. It's an indication. It's only used once. Maybe you should think twice. Stability, is it a stable module if you test it? It always returns the expected result. What are the number of active committers on it? If there's only one and something happens, it's not maintained anymore. So it's also a small risk. What are the number of open bugs and what's the security background? If you do use all of these checks and selecting modules. What we actually do at Uplex is we create a list. This one is an Excel list for a customer which we actually gives us an overview of the status of certain modules. And if in the right column there's a red circle. Sorry. Okay, no problem. So when there's a red smiley, that means we cannot use a module. That's specifically for this customer. He does not agree with modules which has only one committed, for example. With green there's no problem, and there's orange we have to talk about. So let's take a look at how the modules compare to the core. So first of all, you have the Drupal API at the bottom. On top of that, there are some core modules which are provided with the product. For example, taxonomy is a core module to do classification. Comments is a core module. User is a core module. On top of that, you can add extra modules. Those are called contributed modules, or you can also add your own modules, which are called custom modules. And on top of that, you have your theme, which is mostly custom. And we're looking at bigger websites. When you build your own blog, you can use one of the stock themes, but mostly the theme is custom. And on top of, beneath that, you actually have the database which connects to the Drupal API. So you really do not have to write your own SQL queries. There's an API provided to query the database. It's very important to know. You can do the queries, not recommend, because things will get messed up. Drupal is very modular, and actually it uses a paradigm called hierarchical module view controller, hierarchical MVC, which actually means that it's not a full MVC system, but actually the different modules are all small MVC systems on their own. So we have, first of all, the MVC presentation. So we have presentation as a thing of logic and data. And when you take a look at the modules, all modules span across these different layers. So all modules can provide, for example, front-end user interface. They can have a form to make some configuration. They can contain some business logic, and they can connect to the database and have some data there. So all modules actually span across these three layers. They do not have to, but most they do. And they also communicate with each other, those modules. Drupal actually, until Drupal 7, all code in Drupal was actually written by the Drupal community itself. So Drupal actually lives a bit on its own island there. So there was only one vendor library in Drupal 7, which was jQuery. That's the only one. All the other code in the product is written by the community itself. So they do not use other frameworks or libraries, etc. Only jQuery. So it has a bit of a disadvantage there. So because it lives on its own island, it really holds back the community growth. Because you really keep the knowledge in the community, so it's hard for people to come in the community because Drupal is really a thing of its own. It's hard to find good Drupal talent. All documentation needs to come from inside. You probably noticed that documentation isn't always that good for either core or contributed modules, and especially for the core pieces of the system. You could use some more documentation there. And it reduces compatibility with other systems because we're really living on its own. And compared, Drupal 8 contains 7 vendor libraries, so that's a big step forward. So they're using Symfony in there, Guzzle, Twig, all these kind of things, make that the documentation is much more broader and we can learn from other teams and other technologies too. So that's a very important step forward for Drupal there. Drupal has no separate backend system. Actually, when you compare it to more enterprise systems, they mostly use an architecture where there's a front end and a separate back end where you administer your content and you publish stuff in the front end. Drupal does not work that way. So, essentially there you have your web server and your visitors connect to that web server to look at your website, to interact with the website. On the other hand, you as a webmaster or an editor also connect to the same web server, which means everything happens in real time. So everything happens on the same server. By by using this architecture, you get all the advantages from user-generated. You have all the facilities to do user-generated content. All the users are in the web server. It's really easy to interact with your users, to do personalization. Everything happens in real time. So it has a lot of advantages, this system, compared to more like a publishing system, for example. Drupal is very event-driven. It actually uses some kind of observable pattern. In Drupal it's called hooks. And what it does is you can actually hook into various events in the system. So for example, the event happens like a user logs into your website, you can hook into that event and execute some extra functionality. So for example, show a message on the screen or connect to Facebook and get this age, for example. Those are things you can do, and it's all done using hooks. That's the way modules communicate with each other and also communicate with the core system. So you can easily change the behavior of the system and add things to the system using these hooks. Another thing is, because it is with a real-time system, and when you request a web page, it's automatically created for you on the fly. And there's really a lot of caching necessary to make it performant. It's a very important part of Drupal. So, just to make it more clear, what you're now going to see is actually all the function calls that happen when you make a request to Drupal. For every page request you make, this diagram, it's going to process this diagram, it's going to request it's going to call all the functions. So, let's take a look what happens. So, there's a lot of steps in here, and all these steps happen on the moment you request a page. So, things get slow. You need, or you can put in some massive amount of web servers. You can put in 3 web servers with 12 gigabytes of RAM, and you have a lot of visitors that are coming in at the same time. Or you can use some caching. Actually, caching only works when you're not logged in. When you're logged in, you can cache certain pieces of the page when the visitor logs in. Because there's also a lot of personalization when the visitor logs in. But for anonymous users, you can use caching. So that's very important. Drupal is very user and content-centric. It's really built for user-generated content because it really, the roots are in that message board system, and the fact that it's a central web server. So right now, I want to give you an overview of the 3 most important concepts you need to grasp before going into Drupal, which are actually, there are other ones, but the most important ones, I think, are node, user, and block. And you grasp these components, you can go further in digging into Drupal. So node, user, and blocks. So let's take a look at nodes and users. Nodes are actually some kind of object where all content is derived from. Every piece of content in your Drupal website practically is a node. You can have things, you can do things customly, you can have taxonomy things, displaying content, but most of the content are nodes. So they actually use the same base system, every piece of content. So content nodes can have a type that are called content types. There's only one content type for every node. Content types can have fields, multiple fields. So for example, if you have a content type event, you can have some fields added to it. You can have a date or a location. It also has a build mode. Every content type has several build modes actually. So which you can use to present the content to the user. Different kinds of presenting content. For users, they have a user profile, which also can have fields. So you can have an age field, for example, or taxonomy, which indicates the interests of the people. Users also have a role, and roles have permissions. So all the rights management in Drupal is done based on roles. All permissions are assigned to roles, and roles are assigned to users. You never assign permissions directly to a separate visitor or a separate user. Then there is the block system, which actually is a system to place blocks on your website. What you can see here is actually a page which contains several regions. So this is a region, it's the sidebar on the left, and you can place your blocks into regions. So on the right we have a block, you can place a block, you can place some blocks at the top, some social media blocks, or you can have some sharings at the bottom. Those are all blocks and they're placed in regions. Regions are located in page templates. This is a page template for the whole page. Practical example, this is a website we built for teenagers, and on the top you have a blog for social things, and also a blog of related media. For this movie, actually a website for a cinema. For this movie review, we actually are having related media displayed alongside the picture, alongside the cover, all related videos and pictures of that movie. Okay, those were actually the main concepts. Now we're going to dive into how Drupal actually solves different functional requirements when you're dealing with the content management system. So first of all, the administrative UI. This is the Drupal administrative UI. You can see you have a black bar at the top, and actually you can manage your content and your website. It's going full screen here, so it doesn't depend on the front end. The look and feel we're using, we can make it front end look and feel. This is actually the backend theme that is actually used by default. So, how does Drupal work with content publishing? Every piece of content in Drupal, every node, every piece of content is actually a node, practically speaking. So, this list, for example, shows you a list of nodes. Right here you can see they're all having a title. This is the node type. You also see who published the node or who created the node. And the status, for example, is published or not. So every node, like you can see here, has a type. And publishing is actually a boolean in Drupal. So you can only have two states for a piece of content. Content can be published, or content is not published. That's everything you can do out of the box. You can schedule nodes if you want to be published in the future. That's a contributed module. So right here you can see the interface. You can pick dates and time when this content needs to be published or unpublished in the future automatically. That's a contributed module. So that's not possible out of the box. Next to that, it's important to know that nodes can be scheduled, but you can't schedule revisions, for example. There's also other modules to do that. Just when you want to create a new revision of a piece of content, and you want to save it as a draft, that's not possible by default, for example. You have to install things like Workbench module. So just to give you an idea of what is included in the core, it's not that much. Most things come from contributed modules. Just to talk about the Workbench system for a minute. So you can add some workflows if you want to. So you can have different states. So not next to published and unpublished, you can have the draft states. You can have needs review. You can put it in archive. We need separate modules for that. The best one, we think, is the Workbench, the most complete one. The best user interface. So how about presentation? So when doing a website, actually what you want to do is present your content. There are two main ways of presenting content. Or you present it on a page, so a piece of content has a page, or you can create a list of content. Right here you can see that the list can be very simple list, just an image with some text and you repeat it for every item. It can also be a slideshow. It's also a list. It's a different form of list. But actually, you're still having pages or you're doing lists. Pages are provided by default in Drupal core. Every node has its own page. It has its own URL. So this is a page of a movie, for example, in the website we talked about. And it's actually displayed as a full page, and it's using by default, it's using the build mode default. That's the default way of outputting the contents of this node, presenting. It's using the default build mode. And it actually gives you a page, which you can choose what the order of the fields is on that page, for example. You can create templates for that page. It's provided by default. Also, the system of build modes is included in core. So right here you can see the same principle, but now build mode. So you can see a list right here of movies using the build mode carousel item. And you can see that the build mode actually can change the way the movie is displayed. This is not a real page for every movie. You just have a poster and right. When you go and move over a movie, you see some details, for example. That's a build mode. This is a list. So lists are not, you cannot create lists out of the box. You can do by writing code. But actually the most common way to create lists in Drupal is using the views module. For example, this page actually has 3 views on it. The top view actually gives an overview of all cinema rooms in the cinema complex. And this is actually every row is actually a separate theater. Theater screen actually. And it's using the theater screen build mode. This build mode for theater screen node. These are movies listed in the top 10. There's also a separate build mode next to carousel item and the default for the page. You have a small build mode only displaying the item, for example. And right there you have views, which displays, for example, a date and a small introductory text. So those views are all created, those lists are all created using views and build modes. So views can do all kind of things. It gives you a UI to build your query. You can build views on nodes, tags, comments, whatever you want, you can plug into it. You can also decide upon the output of the list. So you can have a table as an output, you can create a grid. So it not only handles building the query, but also gives you opportunities to decide what front-end UI you want to use to present content to your user. So, classification, how do you classify your content? In Drupal, it's done using the taxonomy system. And actually, it works like this. So every node can have a term. The term is actually just another name for a tag. In most systems, we're using the term tag, the principle of tags. It's called just terms in Drupal. Nodes can have multiple terms. Terms can be assigned to multiple nodes. Just a basic principle of tagging. And in Drupal, all terms actually are divided into vocabularies. So you can have vocabulary with, for example, interests of persons. You can have a vocabulary with movie genres, for example. And users can also be tagged. And tags themselves can also be tagged again. So it's a very flexible system. So what does it look like in the front end? Well, you have 2 websites here. And you can see there are several tags here. So you have the genres of the movie. You have some labels, those are also tags. Tags can be text, but also images. So you can translate your tag to an image. And on the right-hand side, you have a block with actually every tag can have a color. For example, you see the economy one is green, and the bottom one you can't see very good, but it's more yellow. So tags can all have different properties assigned with like color or images. Okay. This was a pleasant part of the presentation. Now we're going to go into another thing. It's called multilingual. So doing multilingual websites in Drupal is hard. Until Drupal 7, it was very hard. So let's take a look at it. Core only contains some of the basic stuff for doing multilingual websites. Not much advanced things in there. So what you can do with core, every piece of content, every node actually can have a language. That's it. There's no interface provided actually to make translations easy or to link translations together. Just core only provides the basic stuff. And actually, if you want to build an advanced multilingual website, you need extra modules. The suite most times used is called an internationalization suite. Is actually a whole bunch of modules. It actually consists of a lot of modules. So you can see here, we have different modules to do field translations, for example. To translate your menus, you have to add another module to enable another module. If you want to translate your URLs, you want to translate your strings, or want to synchronize translations across languages, taxonomy, it's all different kind of modules. So it's a big set of modules you need to use there. Actually, a lot of disadvantages to that approach. There are some problems with the menu system because it has a bad UI in the backend when doing menus multilingually. You have to have separate menus for every language, for example. Whatever option you pick, you will get into trouble. It conflicts with other contributed modules, so not all contributed modules plug into the multilingual internationalization module, so they do not need to because it's not the core. All the internationalization module is a contributed module, and other modules do not work well with it sometimes. Something to keep in mind. There's also some problems with taxonomy. If you want to have separate vocabularies per language, you have different options there too. And also there are some UI problems that not that user friendly. So really, that's actually the most hard part in doing Drupal. I think it's doing multilingual websites. You really drives up the budget you need to build your website. Asset management. Actually, it's the same here. So the core only provides the basic upload file upload field, so you can add an image, do some pieces of content if you want. There's no actually real asset management provided. If you want some asset management, you need to install contributed modules like, for example, a media module, which actually still is very basic, but it's more like what core has to offer. You can search through your images you have. You can easily build up a library of things to use on your website. It's not provided in core, it's contributed. Forms, actually, core provides an API to have fields. But actually to have your users actually build forms, you have to install, for example, web form module. And right here you can see an example which shows the web form module together with the form builder module. Those are contributed modules, and they allow you to easily use drag and drop to create a form and actually set up which emails need to go out to which persons when the form is submitted, for example. This is also a contributed module. It's not an overall. Mailing. So, in all cases, doing mailing from the web server itself actually is a bad idea if you have to do a lot of mailing. If you want to do mass mail, send out newsletters, there are some modules there that can do it, but it's actually more recommended to just integrate with a real mailing system like, for example, MailChimp. If you want to do it on the web server, you can have some problems with performance. If you want to send out mail during the day with all the visitors on your website, things will go slow. You have no tracking of where mails are going, which mails are read. You cannot do batch sending, segmentation, those kind of things. You get blacklisted very quick. So it's very much better to just use another service like MailChimp or email garage and integrate with that system. You have a lot more functionality. So there are a lot of cases where it's much better to just integrate with another system. If you want to display some ads, some ads on your website, it's just better to integrate with a separate system called, for example, OpenX or so. It gives you much more functionality than Drupal 4 can offer you. Or contrary. Personalization. Drupal is actually very user-centric, like we talked about, so everything revolves around the user. Nodes are assigned to users. Users can post notes to your website, can post comments, and can do some ratings, and everything revolves around the user object. So it's not that difficult to do personalization and targeting. So if you want to have certain content displayed for certain users, it can be done. There are some frameworks available, but most of the time it's just do it yourself. Just use the hook system and build things the way you want them. Integrate with Facebook you can do, but grab some things when the user logs in, you can do it yourself, no problem there. All the building blocks are in core, you just have to put them together. Next is search. So there is a basic search system in Drupal. It works actually on PHP level and just uses the MySQL database as an index. It's not the ideal situation. The index is kept in the database. The database is not meant for indexing content, it's just it's a database. There's no indexing system. So it's rather slow and does not offer that much functionality. So what you can do is you can integrate, for example, if you want some more advanced stuff, for example, Apache Solr, you can have some more advanced good contributed modules available to integrate with Solr. You can have faceted search and those kinds of things. It's much faster. And it's feature rich. So you can have much more features when using other search systems. So actually those are the most important functional features you would expect from a content management system. We saw how Drupal actually filled in those pieces, those requirements. Right now we're going to go over some technical features. Those are the features that your visitors will not actually see or deal with. Or yourself as a webmaster, it's more like technical stuff. So SEO, for example. Drupal does rank the URLs out of the box. It also offers you RDFA, for example, so you can enrich your HTML with some semantic meaning. So you can have some semantics added to your HTML. For an address, for example, or a phone number. Those are provided in core, the basic framework. Other things, for example, XML sidebar, that's a contributed model. But core actually provides the right APIs to do all these kind of things. So there are a lot of contributed models to help you do meta tags, for example. Another thing is multi-site. So you can have several Drupal websites building on the same code base. So right here you can see the code base, which is actually core, those are all the modules, and all the custom modules you build, and themes can be in there too, just one code base. You can actually use that code base to build different websites, more than one website. So on top of the code base, you can deploy several websites. And all websites share the same code base, but actually connect to different databases or different needs. So every website has different database. It also has a separate files directory, but that's not that important. So multi-site is a very good invention, actually. It works very well, but you have to be careful with it because you create strong dependencies between your websites. If you have several clients demanding a website, you're going to put several clients in the multi-site, you get into trouble definitely, because they all have other requirements concerning security updates or bug fixes. They're all different SLAs running on different clients. So if you want to do Drupal update the core, for example, you have to check all your websites on the multi-site. It's not always what you want. So you have to be careful, it's not always the best solution. It's a good solution if you have a family of websites. For example, if you have 4 blogging websites, they all do practically the same, they have different branding, you can put it on a multi-site. For the movie website, the theater website, we have for 5 different countries, they all have a website that does the same, has different content, we use a multi-site. But for different projects at different clients, it's actually not that beneficial to use multi-site. So it's not really feasible for separate projects. Product lifecycle, a short word about that. So, like we talked about, there are several components in a typical Drupal website. So we have core and the modules on top of that. So there are different cycles. So first of all, we have the major version cycle, which is upgrades from the between the major versions of Drupal. So for example, a major version is Drupal 7, and Drupal 8 comes out, it's a new major version. It's like 2, 3, or 4 years between major versions, to give you an idea. And in every major version, you have several minor versions going on. Those are actually every month or so, you have a new minor version. Every 2 months, it depends. Minor versions contain bug fixes and security fixes and do not change APIs or do not change the general concepts of Drupal. On the other hand, the major versions actually do. For major versions, there's actually no backwards compatibility. So what it means is that when you write code for Drupal 7, you can't use it in Drupal 6 or Drupal 8. So there's no compatibility between the major versions. There's no guarantee. Because of the process of innovation, they want to create a clean slate every time all over again. So it's something to keep in mind. It has a lot of consequences actually. So this is actually a project lifecycle and doing the typical project. Say, for example, you started your project in Drupal 6 at the end of 2010, and what happens is Drupal 7 comes out in the beginning of 2011. You couldn't start with Drupal 7 already because contributed modules weren't imported yet, and the Drupal 7 release was probably not that stable yet. So you started on Drupal 6, we go forward in time and we see the project finishes by the end of 2012, it's about a year. Everything's going fine, and then Drupal 8 comes out. In the meanwhile, you're doing minor updates to your site to keep security up to date, etc. Then Drupal 8 actually is released, and you have several options. Actually, important to know that when a new version of Drupal is released, support for there's only support for the current version of Drupal and the previous version for Drupal, not for the versions that came before. So if Drupal 8 comes out, Drupal 6 release drops away. So you're stuck. There are no security updates. Actually, you can't be guaranteed there are security updates anymore for your product. Module maintainers will not or maintain their modules anymore for their Drupal 6 versions of their modules. So it's important to keep that in mind. So Drupal 8 comes out. What you can do is you start your upgrade to Drupal 8. You can't upgrade right away because the product isn't stable yet and all the contributed modules aren't there yet. So you have to wait a bit. Maybe you can start right away when Drupal 8 comes out, or maybe even before, because right now in Drupal 8 much more of the key modules are actually in core, like the multilingual system is in core, views is in core. So you probably could start a bit earlier, but there is a problem here. When you you start your upgrade and you finish it, actually is a period where you have no support for your website. So because you're running, when you're doing Drupal, when you're upgrading your website, you're still having a Drupal 6 website live. So there's no support anymore for that version of Drupal, for that website. There's no support available anymore. So we have that red indicator really shows you the problem. And you can see what Drupal.org just did. Yesterday they just upgraded Drupal 7 just before Drupal 8 comes out. So what you actually need to do in this situation is just follow every Drupal version to make sure you keep all the support. So it's a lot of work to just keep track and keep your project up to date, your website up to date in every major version of Drupal. So actually there are several, when the release of the minor module happens, there are, on the one hand you have security fixes, and at the same time, mostly they're also a bug fix. You can choose whatever, you can choose to install just the security release or the bug fix release. Security release is for quick deployment, because it don't change the system, only fixes security stuff. Bug fixes can change the behaviors of the system. They're minor, but they can change. So they need more testing. If you want to do a quick deploy, you can only release the security update. So every first Wednesday of each month, there's a bug fix release coming out. It's not actually true. Those are release windows. So every first Wednesday of each month, there can be a bug fix release. Every third Wednesday of each month, there can be a security release. So you can put it in your planning, for example. Have people available to do that. So the Drupal security team actually maintains the security across core, but also across contributed modules. And they send out email reports, for example, or on Twitter when there's a vulnerability. This is the core vulnerability. You can see all the properties. You can take action. And for contributed like this. So this is the module and where the problem is. You can decide if the problem is if you're using the module, you should update the module. So about the future, Drupal 8 is coming out in 2014. Actually, there's a good page put up last week about Drupal 8 on Drupal.org. It's a more high-level view of what Drupal 8 will be all about. Actually, what it will be all about is configuration management will be provided in core. So configuration will actually not be in the database anymore. It will be maintained in files. There's a big advantage for site builders. Multilingual will be in core, which is very important because it's in core, all contributed modules have to plug into the multilingual system in core. So the compatibility problem between contributed modules and the multilingual contributed module is solved in Drupal 8. Also, the user interface is now okay, and it provides you with all the functionality you have in internationalization module right now, and much better. So the backend UI is updated, it's now responsive. You can have inline editing. REST web services are in core. You have open patterns in core and Symfony integration. So Drupal 8 really leads from the Symfony project and actually pulls in a lot of libraries from there, a lot of concepts. For example, the routing system, the database abstraction is now all coming from the Symfony project. So we can all use as developers of the Symfony plugin, documentation, stack. Okay. There's also a new templating system, so which does away with the old PHP templating system, which was not that good anyway. It's now called Twig. It's by the same builders of the Symfony system. It actually gives you real time information. And the backend is now responsive for what it's worth. This is actually, I ordered them. Just the most important thing for us is the document. So we have configuration management and multilingual, which are in core. The rest is not that important for us. Those are big advantages for developers, which you cannot, they're not major steps forward, except for the OO patterns, but they're not really an advantage for clients or like for developers. So the real advantages come, I think, from the first two. So to conclude the session, I want to say that Drupal is a very lightweight framework, so it does not provide you with full-fledged CMS. Functionality comes from contributed modules. It's very content and user-centric, and it's extremely flexible and extendable. You can change everything. Some pitfalls we have to know too. So, content modules sometimes, or most of the time, actually have quality issues. We now have, I think, 1/3 of all contributed modules are actually, or 1/4 are actually good to use in enterprise context. The other ones needs customization, or you can't use it because of problems you have, like we discussed. There's a lack of good UI consistency because of all the contributed modules. Take a look at the panels module; it doesn't look like anything else in the Drupal ecosystem. They are free to use their own interface for webmasters. So there's a bit of a lack of consistency there. And Drupal 8 does not change that much for end users. You have inline editing and you have a mobile backend, but actually there's some of the backend interface screens are changed and more user-friendly, but they're not any groundbreaking things. That's not a real big problem, I think. It's not an easy one to sell or to demo for a client. I just gave a demo internally at Amplexor. I just demoed Drupal 7 in context of this presentation. I also gave a small demo about Drupal 8. After 2 minutes I was done. So it's not really a product that you can show off, I think, what we think. So that was it for this session about the overview of Drupal. Are there any questions? Yes?
I'd be interested, how quick do you deploy when after a new Drupal release is up there? How quick you can deploy an enterprise-ready website?
Do you mean a full project or just an update?
Yes, let's say on the 1st of March you get Drupal 8.
Yeah.
And
hi.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, let's say on the 1st of March you get the stable release for Drupal 8. How quick can you deploy a customer project with Drupal 8, considering the contrib modules and all the implications?
So to give you an example, Drupal 7 came out in the beginning of 2011. We released our first project in the beginning of 2012. There was a problem with Drupal 7 because of the contributed modules, which were very late actually. We had views which was there quite early. A lot of the modules were not stable or ready to go on the live production side yet. So we had to wait a long time before we actually, it was a big project, just to say. For a small project, I think you can start maybe before Drupal 8 is released, if all the contrib modules are there. Because right now contrib is more in core, so it would go very much faster now, because views is there and multilingual is there. So it will be faster right when Drupal 8 comes out. And I guess you can start just right, not quite yet. I think when the release candidates are out, you can start developing them. It just depends on what kind of project you're doing.
I'm asking because on Drupal 7 there was a pledge to deploy contrib modules on the date Drupal 7 was released, but still you could only deploy something stable after at least 8-10 months.
Yeah, it's a problem in the community. I think there were pledges, and I saw some module pages just the other week were still pledging Drupal 7. They still didn't have Drupal 7 release right now. So it's a problem. It's really a problem. And I think there are some problems with key modules which are not maintained that well. Views is now solved because it's in core. It has a new menu. It has an auto maintainer which is working very actively there. But other modules still have problems which are actually very key modules.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so what puzzles me really is you mentioned that, well, it's a well-known fact by now that Drupal 8 is based on kind of Symfony, I think it's Symfony 2 as a framework. And why was Symfony 2 chosen as a framework? I mean, don't get me wrong here, I'm a great fan of Symfony from a big distance, you know, because I'm a Ruby on Rails fan, but and it's kind of similar. But how do you choose like something so crucial as a framework below a semi-framework like Drupal is?
Just to make things clear, I'm not involved in the picking of the framework. I'm not involved in core development here. So, but I think the most important reason was because of the vibrant community that lived behind Symfony framework and the big community developers going on there. I think there are other projects which were equally suited, like for example the Zen framework. But I think there were good connections with Fabien of the Symfony project. I think there's also, because they have the templating engine going on, the Twig system, which we're also needing a replacement for. That's all I know, but I think it's mostly the community is quite big behind Symfony. It's the most forward-thinking system. They also break compatibility with Symfony 1 completely. People were going mad, just like in Drupal, a new version comes out, you have to rewrite the custom modules. The same in Symfony 1 to Symfony 2, it's kind of the same philosophy there. And I think the community of the Symfony project really wanted to participate in the integration of Symfony in core. It's also a very important thing to think that's why they picked Symfony. I'm not sure.
For Symfony, it was a timing thing. Symfony is actually seeking for other open source products they can couple to. So Drupal was seeking for a framework they can leverage the low-level components. So timing was perfect. I think it was more of that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay. Other questions?
You mentioned if you change the new version, you need to implement new module, but you didn't mention the data. How do you migrate the data from use if it was moved into the core?
So there's no backwards compatibility between the different major versions, but there is an upgrade path. Actually, it was until Drupal 7. In Drupal 8, there isn't an upgrade path anymore, there is only the migration path. An upgrade path really provides you a way to do a real upgrade from your contributed modules to new versions. The migrate system for Drupal 8 only gives you the opportunity, it's a very big deal, gives you the opportunity migrate contributed module is in core of Drupal 8 since a couple of weeks, and gives you the opportunity to migrate your data from a previous version to a new version of Drupal. You have to make sure that you only use the standard ways of storing content and storing stuff in the database. When you're creating custom database tables and you're writing SQL queries straight into the database, you get into trouble because migration is not correct. So when you're using basic building blocks from Drupal, like nodes, taxonomy, user, not that much customization, you can use the migration path provided in core between the major versions.
I refer to the contrib module. For example, view module, if it was moved into the core, then the views module migration.
Yeah, I'm not up to date with the views module, how it handles creating your views or porting your views from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. I'm not up to date with that, but I think you can import your old views into new view really content, that's actually configuration we're talking about. So there's a big change in the configuration system too, so I'm not sure about it. Okay?